Are you using addressables and audio mixers in your Unity project and all of a sudden come across a crazy problem where some objects just aren't listening to your audio mixer, but only in the build? I know, a very specific problem, but I'm Addison, developer of My Liege, and an indie developer who ran into that, beat his head against the wall for a day, and now wants to tell you what it's about so that maybe you can save some sanity too. I'll dive into the problem, show you how I found it, how I confirmed what was happening, and what the solution was. So if you have this problem, great. I hope I can help. If you don't, then just be entertained by some issues that developers run into, and maybe you'll find it entertaining either way. So let's jump in and I'll show you what the problem was. I have my game here. This is the old build with the problem in it. And so you'll see I've got my volume muted right now. But if I have it on, we're great. So, all things look like they're working right. When I have it muted, it is muted. Nothing's making sound. No button clicks, no, opening these meeple menus. However, when I played the cinematic, excuse me, I'm getting the footstep sounds from the meeples, and I'm getting the trumpet sounds from the music associated with the cinematic. But nothing else. So I'm only getting some of it. So that was pretty strange. We go into Unity now. I'm gonna try to replicate that same issue. So we'll just dive into play mode. Verify that, yep. We're making noise, but I'm gonna mute it. And everything works fine. So what gives? Well, so first things first. There are differences between how Unity in Editor runs and how it runs with your build. And now, I'm not going to go into a deep dive or pretend I know exactly what's happening. But what I learned is, once you are using like addressables, there are multiple modes that the play mode can be in. And so when you're in this window here for the addressable groups, you'll see across the top there's different profiles and tools you can set up. But the thing that I had never tinkered with was the play mode script. And I was getting frustrated with having this issue of like I have a problem only when I build the game, but I can't see what's happening. So do I have to like in the editor add a lot of debug log warnings, things like that, and then jump into play mode, run into the problem, rush over to the player log to see if I can suss out? Not quite. What you can do is in this play mode scripts, there are options. And so the default option is use the asset database. I have started using use existing build for when I want to mimic a production build of the game. And so what this will actually do is you need to have a build of the game that it's going to actually run off of. So it's going to, serialize, package everything up, and then you're going to be pulling from that, not the Unity asset database, which is much more raw and fast. If you haven't done it before, I went ahead and I just did new build with a default build script. You can update your a previous build to make sure you're all up to date. I did all that already, so I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to put this back so that I don't lose it. And then let's go ahead and play. I did click it, right? Yes. Use existing build. Now we're going to run, and I should be able to replicate the issue now. Double check the settings. Yep, we're cooking. And there we go. Now the editor is behaving like my production build. It's already big plus for me, because I'd had that happen a couple of times where like something didn't quite work with the production build, and I was struggling to figure, I didn't have my debug tools. I didn't have my my inspector and everything. Well, now I can do that. So what's happening here? Now that we've replicated the issue, what is actually going on? And what I learned is one last bit of the setup. I was using addressables, but only for like scriptable objects. So I was still doing the normal scenes though. So my scenes are listed in the build settings, and everything that they need is pulled in when loaded. So my main like background audio, for instance, is attached to this audio manager, audio source music, and this is where my audio mixer is attached. And so my scene isn't addressable, my audio mixer isn't addressable. So what was happening is, because I have these cinematics as scriptable objects that are addressable, and then let's actually find the one that's for Godfrey arriving. There we go. So it's an addressable. It's using this prefab, and this prefab is where the audio source is. So long way of saying that I have an audio source that is on an addressable, and when the game loads that, it doesn't, the connection's no longer there of who's my audio mixer. So what it does is it creates a copy of the audio mixer for addressable assets to use. But there's the audio mixer that my game's code is using. So I have a reference here to audio mixer on my audio manager, and that's what my settings are actually impacting. That's the normal one. And so my copy isn't getting the same changes. How can you know if this is happening for you? So let's go ahead. I'm gonna play the game again. And we're going to pull up the profiler tool. So if you haven't used profiler a bunch, it becomes super helpful once you have a more mature project to start getting comfortable with this. So I would recommend occasionally popping this open. So I think this is how it starts off. You've got, I believe it starts with like CPU, GPU usage, and rendering. But if you click on this profiler modules, you have all these different options. So I'm going to turn these off, and we're just going to look at audio. And already this is kind of neat. I can see like how many audio sources are in this scene, how many are playing, paused, all that. And we're going to go ahead and switch this from simple to detailed. And what this is going to do for us is now I can see my different channels, my different groups. And the groups are referring to the mixer groups. So what we can see here is what I was talking about, where I have the one listener, but I have two mixers. One's a copy of the other, and the first one is the one that's actually attached to my audio manager and got the settings applied to it. The other one did not. And so what's happening is anything that comes in that I load in during runtime from addressables, if it plays a sound, it's going to use these, this copy. And it's going to be loud. It's going to come out. It's not going to get this negative infinity decibels applied to it. And there's the problem. So how do we fix this? There was a couple of suggestions. One was, when you load in the like when you load this in, what I could have done is, like in my audio manager, I'm gonna pause so we don't brick something here. But in my audio manager, I could do something in the awake where instead of having my mixer be private, I could make this public. And I'm already doing my audio manager as a singleton. And so then what I would have to do is go to, say, my cinematic class and say, okay, my cinematic, it knows its audio source. And when it comes into existence, it needs to go ahead and set its mixer group equal to the audio manager dot instance dot audio mixer. And so I would have to still massage this a little bit because I don't want it to be the full mixer. I want it to be the subgroup for the music. So I could do that though. I didn't like that though because I have a lot of things and it's not trivially obvious. So like, yes, the cinematic is an addressable asset. But you'll remember when I had the problem, my meeples, only the meeples that were part of the cinematic though, I was hearing their footsteps too. And so it goes deeper than that. And it was because in that cinematic prefab, I'll pull it up here. I have meeples in it that have audio sources on them. And my meeple isn't an addressable asset. My normal meeples work just fine. But because they're being referenced through scene, not by reference through an addressable asset, they work differently. So now I need to make sure that anything that could get loaded that could have an audio source. So like if I have a torch with a can or with like an audio source for the flickering noise effect, now I need to apply that too, and it just that felt messy. And some people were like, okay, well, just write a script that queries the whole scene, finds all the audio sources, and it just all felt gross, if you will. Like, I didn't like any of those. So what I ended up doing is I ended up switching my scenes to be addressable assets. And what that will do is, if everything comes in as addressable assets, then there's no issues of having some addressables and some non-addressables. Because when the scene is an addressable asset, what happens during the build is it will take that scene and say, hey, what are all your dependencies? They need to be in this addressable asset bundle as well. And so now when the scene loads from addressables, the audio mixer will also come in correctly. And so then later cinematics will show up and be like, hey, I need a mixer. Oh, hey, I know my mixer. Excellent. And it'll start to be homogenized again. Admittedly, this is something I probably should have done when I first set up addressables. In fact, if you look up like Unity's addressables manual, yeah, for converting to addressables and how you convert your scene data. I'm probably going to make a separate video on how, the steps you need to do to do that. I don't plan on making this a tutorial channel necessarily, but I do want to like highlight big issues that I think are really tough. Because if I had found this kind of video, I maybe would have solved this problem a lot quicker. Okay, so we are good to go. I just basically switched my Git branch, and I have some cat tech support attempting to help right now. But big difference as we can see, I'm no longer bringing in the main scenes in the build. They are now going to be loaded as addressables. You can also see that if you just go to your scenes list and you just check, yep, I marked them as addressable, we're cooking. The only one that isn't is you need one initialization scene. Not going to get into weeds on that one, but it's just like the first one to load. Double check our audio again. We're cooking. And look at that. We have fixed the problem. couple important things to note here is if we go ahead and we're going to pull up that profiler window again, if we're looking at the channels and groups, and I'm going to actually pause it so that it's a little smoother, we can see that we still get the two mixers. And I think that's just unavoidable because it's going to see that, like, I think it just sees the mixer in the assets and puts it up there, but then sees that it needs that the addressables are referring and like need that addressable version. And so it's going to grab that. But the big deal is that the copy is the one that is actually connected to my audio manager now. And that's the one that my settings are impacting and that everything is respecting. And we can tell everything's using it because if we look, all of my sound sources, this is under channels and groups when you're in that detailed mode, you can see every single asset or item in the scene that's making noise. And so all of them are using the same mixer. There's no split anymore. Isn't it weird that there's still two audio mixers in the profiler? Yes, but like as far as I can tell, this is just the world we live in. And why, if you're going to use addressables, it's highly recommended to use the scene. I guess I'm highly recommending it. Unity hasn't made it like a hard yes, you have to, because there might still be reasons why you want to load your scene the old-fashioned way and micromanage things. There's always a reason people want to micromanage things. Every game's a little bit different, but that's where we are at. Basically, is I fixed my problem, a very weird problem. If this helps one person, I will feel happy. If it helps no people, I'll still feel happy. But yeah, maybe I'll do a couple more of these of just like, I had this really strange issue. Here was the fix to help avoid people beating their heads against the wall. And maybe it's entertaining for you to watch me struggle with a weird issue and come up with what the solution was. If you have any opinions on that or anything that you would like to hear more about that I've mentioned before, get in the comments or something. I think I'm definitely, while I'm still here and it's all fresh, I'll show like what using scene addressables means and a couple of nuances. Oh, one important thing is, because I talked about the play mode script, I'm only going to be using the use existing build when testing a problem that I only see in builds or like whatnot, because like if you make any change in the inspector, you now have to rebuild your project, and it does use caching to do this update a previous build. But sometimes you can also get in a spot where like your cache is a little screwed up because too much changed. So now that I'm done with that, I'm just going to toggle this back to use asset database. That way, when I make changes, they actually show up immediately, you know? One minor thing, if you missed that part, that's a bummer. But either way, thank you. Hope this helps, and adios.